Welcome to the Build Your Village series, where I interview moms raising kids in consciousness. This is Sarah Wayne, and as a mother myself to a special needs child, I discovered more than ever how a supportive village is the only sane way to raise a family and run a business. It's my intention that you find valuable takeaways from these women, see them as a resource for you, add them to your village. We are one, we're united on this planet, and I see you and your need to be supported on this journey. So I'd like to introduce to you my first guest. Her name is Pamela Aaralyn. And Pamela Aaralyn is a God-realized mystic, having been personally guided by God-realized masters such as Sri Ramana Maharishi, Gurudev, Ma Anandamayi, Yogananda, and Jesus. Since age 5, she has deepened her devoted practice and has been trained as a highly sensitive guru of profound compassion and grace. After 38 years of devoted practice, including the initiation into the elemental shamanism, the ancient focus of pranic meditation, mastery of source tones and mantra, she was proclaimed Avatar of Grace and Guru by her master in spirit, Sri Ramana Maharishi. Through her loving offering of practical enlightenment, she offers satsangs, mentorships, and live events to busy working parents, laborers, entrepreneurs, students, and devotees from all spiritual backgrounds. Pamela shares her insights gleaned from many years of devoted practice as a working wife and mother, because she is aware that a continued, consistent practice must be efficient, practical, and as easy and apparent as grace. Grace is a gift that we already are, whether you are a beginner or an adept, whether you have 3 minutes or 3 hours available for daily practice. Time or experience is not of the essence. It is the quality of your devotion that produces results. To learn more, feel free to visit any of Pamela's channels on YouTube, Instagram, her website, PamelaAaralyn.com, and on Facebook. So let's get started, and here's our interview. All right, welcome, Pamela. I'm so excited to be talking with you today and to be sharing this experience of bringing consciousness to our families and consciousness to the world, and how we do that in our own unique way. So wanted to ask you some questions and get to know how life looks like for you in that experience of being a mom and being in the field and the work that you do. So thank you. Thanks for really being here today.
Thank you.
All right. So I wanted to ask you if you would just share with people what your current situation as a mom looks like, what your family structure looks like. What do you live in?
There's so many different ways to answer that. It's a wild ride. I say that every mom can attest to that statement. And what it looks like for me is some general structure of, my kids get up and go to school. At least 3 out of 4 of them do. One of them's 18 and out of school. We've done everything in educational systems, from charter schools to public schools to private schools to online virtual academy, which my 18-year-old did that pretty much from 7th grade all the way up to graduation. He's out now. He is starting his own business and just turned 18. So he's pretty proud of the fact that he is starting his own business being 18.
Yeah.
So that's exciting for him. My 15-year-old boy goes to a really cool, tiny charter school in my town. And it has currently 250 something members, and they're trying to grow the school. And it is an incredible school. So my 13-year-old and my 7-year-old go to school as well, to a different charter school that's a liberal arts academy, and they love it. It's arts and sciences. So they love it, and they love the structure and the flexibility and the attention they get emotionally from the teachers. So they love that. And they have a lot of extracurricular activities that they do. They're into robotics, one of them, and filmmaking. That's for my 13-year-old. And like all sorts of STEM activities, And my 7-year-old is into dance and yoga, and she loves to do yoga with me. Yeah, and it's a very interesting environment where they're always busy, and that's our environment. We're pretty flexible. We have the school structure, but our day-to-day beyond school activities, both during and after, is open to how we feel. And that's the primary facet of how my household looks, is that we try to talk and communicate and honor how each other feels.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And do you find that you have a support network that you have had to build over the years to help you with this process? Do you have a partner that works with you in supporting your kids, or like, what does that dynamic look like for you?
Oh, that's incredibly fun. So my partner lives overseas currently.
Mm-hmm.
She lives in another country. And, it's very interesting. We just started the fiance visa process. We're at that stage in our relationship where we're currently engaged. And, and that's very interesting. So insofar as the children's father, he passed away about a year and a half ago, unexpectedly from a heart attack. So that was like a big thing that all of us had to get through.
Mm-hmm.
And it really just took some time for all of us to come around from that. But I'm currently engaged, and my partner is female. And that was really interesting because their dad, my kid's father, had a lot of beliefs that were anti, gay relationship. And he had instilled that into one of them.
Okay.
And kind of the other one wasn't really instilled in him, but it was just sort of like, I don't know what to think and I'm uncomfortable with it, because dad was uncomfortable with it. And that took like a lot for us to get through. But
Yeah.
my partner currently lives in Ireland, and we're engaged and we're going through the process. So we visit each other, and it's just going to take a long time to.
Right now, it's basically you're solo parenting most of the time.
I'm solo parenting, kind of. I get so much emotional support from my partner, and that's a big thing,
Yes.
emotional support. So even though she's not here, she is, because I feel like we're constantly communicating and constantly discussing, our lifestyle and our community, like our own plans, and how we would both feel about parenting techniques and different things like that. My kids really like her, so that's been really awesome.
That's helpful. That's really good. Now, I'm wanting to know a little bit more about your experience with becoming a mom and what type of challenges you were faced with, and how that experience has evolved for you. If there's something that stands out with the new experience, if you can go back to when you became a mom for the first time.
Oh my gosh, yes.
That
Yeah, it was amazing, because I never thought I'd be a good mom. I mean, to be frank, I would tell my friends, I'm never going to have kids.
Right.
That was me. I was that person.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever that person looks like, I was just one of those people who just didn't want to have kids because I didn't think I'd be good at it. Not because I didn't connect to kids. I was always trying to connect to kids.
Mm-hmm.
And if there were bigger kids, I was always great with kids, but like babies freaked me out because I would attempt to hold them and they would scream. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I should never be pregnant or have kids because babies scream when I try to touch them. Yeah.
I can relate to that, actually. Yeah, I felt the same way. Like, I didn't have the natural instinct to just be a mom.
Yeah. So when that happened in our lives, my partner and I at the time were like, neither one of us, we didn't know what to do. We were like, well, okay. Okay. Like, we're not really baby people, and it was really interesting, because my partner at the time, he was a musician in a band, and I was just starting my career as a spiritual teacher, just starting like within that year. And it was doing okay. It was going okay, but it was a beginning career and a beginning, thing for me to actually charge money for being a spiritual teacher and to work with people with energy. It took a lot of shifting. So that was happening while bringing a baby into the world, while also being terrified that babies hate me, quote unquote. So that was fun. And it wasn't true. And I had to learn that right away that it wasn't true. I'm like, this baby likes me. This baby like stops crying when I hold him. This is incredible. So it's like instant bonding right away with
So it
my.
naturally shifted for you, or did you find you had to do certain things to?
It naturally shifted, and I didn't think that it would naturally shift. And then what did have to shift was my idea about my own time. Because I thought that, as I think I was like 25 or something when I was pregnant with Cole. And I was like, well, how am I going to get my own independent space? There's a baby inside of my body. I don't even have space in my own body, So I had to adjust to that. And to understand that, and I went into attachment parenting. That was my particular feeling that I should go towards, and breastfeeding. And he wouldn't breastfeed. And despite the fact that we had this incredible bond, like that wouldn't happen. And then I started going through this process of like shaming myself. And I worked with La Leche League, which was an incredible resource. I highly recommend them. And they worked me through it just kind of enough, but the milk started to dry up and stuff like that. And so I kind of gave up and beat myself up over that for a long time. And, it was just really, really hard. And then I was like, by the time I had Aiden, it was 2 years later that my first 3 kids were back to back to back almost. And I realized that breastfeeding was okay. And then I knew that I had resources, and it was just totally different experience. And I started baby wearing, and I started learning how to breastfeed inside of a sling. I started learning the different positions of different slings. I had like 8 different kinds of slings, and I was so into it, and I could wear them on my back, I could wear them on my side, I could wear them in front. And I started doing workshops with him attaching me and breastfeeding to show other people that it was okay to breastfeed a child. And people would stare at me in malls. I'm like, what? I'm feeding my child. But, would you, if it was a toddler eating from a plate, would you have a concern? So this is just during the time, he's 15 now. So 15 years ago in America, we were just now starting to accept breastfeeding as, okay.
Right. Yeah.
So I was kind of a pioneer of that. And I was like, I don't care. And by the time the 3rd child came along, when Eli came along, I was like, I don't care, straight up. You're lucky to have a shirt on right now. I got like more and more comfortable with breastfeeding. And people, if people glared at me, I'd glare right back and smile,
Yeah. I think a lot of moms have a challenge around breastfeeding, and it's not talked about as openly. That when it's just not something you're prepared for if you don't.
Well, I went to meetup.com by the time my 2nd and 3rd child came, and we had like breastfeeding support groups, and that was incredible to go to. And we would meet like once or twice a week, and we did things together. And when there's like a group of 10 women breastfeeding, their babies, it becomes a lot easier because we're all supporting each other.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't feel so out of the norm. Right.
Yeah.
Nice.
Incredible. And it was the whole thing, and every child was different, and my connection to every child was also different. And I had to adjust to that, like not beat myself up over the fact that, you know what they say, you shouldn't connect to one child more than the other. You should love them all the same. Well, you intuitively know that you love them all the same, but that doesn't mean that your connection is going to be the same.
Yeah. It looks different.
It does. It does look different. How you love that child looks different, and that's okay.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting experience for you having 4 kids, right?
Yeah.
You're 4, and just how you've evolved and how your parenting style is. It sounds like you wouldn't say it's all the same across the board. You really do take a different approach.
Oh, it's so different for each of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then how do you show up, being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, right? You have your own business that you run, and supporting all of that. Like, what does that look like for you your kids are in school, so you have that freedom.
They weren't always.
Right.
And my business was growing and blooming and thriving during the time when my first 3 kids were just babies.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to grow it further and connect to society further with a breastfed child attached to my chest, and then another, and then another. So basically I stopped making excuses for myself. And without beating myself up, without shaming myself, I just said, yes, I breastfeed. Yes, my children interrupt my work. And yes, it's going to happen. They come on, I'm a YouTuber. So they come on screen. They come say hi. They come ask, can they go to a friend's house? And we have conversations. And, you know, it's so funny. Like if I'm in an interview or something with people who don't have kids and they don't understand. And the last time that happened, the person who I was interviewing was like, are you okay? Is everything, what's going on? And I'm like, excuse me, I'm talking to my child.
Yeah.
And she's important. And he didn't know what to do. He was like appalled, you know, his face was like, so I feel like we're still on the brink of that being okay, you know. And when I go to work events, I will not go if children are uninvited. I straight up will not go, you know. And as a spiritual teacher, I get invited to all sorts of things. I get invited to sound healings and sound baths and meditations in people's homes and teachings in large or small environments. And if I will directly, if I'm very interested, I'm like, I have very evolved children. One is 13, one is 7. If they're invited, I will come. If not, you will not receive my business. And that's how I handle that. So I feel like I'm kind of a pioneer in the spiritual industry as well, because most spiritual industries will get a little bit uncomfortable, despite the fact that they say that they're not uncomfortable. When I show up with my kids, I feel it. You know, I'd say I see it, but that's another challenge. I recently went blind, but I feel it. You can feel when people are staring at you, even as a mostly blind person, you know. And I'm just like, I'm going to be the pioneer of this and bring my children everywhere I go, because they are part of me.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
And I make no excuses for it. You don't like it, it's totally cool. I'm not offended by it. And over and out.
Right.
Other people can financially support that and, you know, support that teacher.
Now, when it comes to supporting your kids and your business and growing that, do you have a support team? Do you have people who come in and help you with your house, with doing?
I do, but it took some time to really get there. And I advise people who don't to give yourself some slack on that. And to be okay with getting very resourceful, because during the times when I didn't, I had to get very resourceful. I would reach out to neighbors, you know, and just say, okay, do you have any teenagers that are looking for a little bit extra money? You know, things like that. You know, I have a 13-month-old boy who's likes to stick his fingers in electrical sockets, you know, while I'm working. So do you have a responsible teenager who's looking for some babysitting funds?
Yeah.
Things like that.
You didn't have family around when you were raising your kids?
No, I live in the West, and my mom, which is basically, I wouldn't say my only living relative, but my dad passed away when I was 30. My grandparents passed away, you know, when I was younger as well. I didn't even meet one of my grandparents, you know. So I didn't always have, you know, and then they one passed when I was a teenager and another one in my 20s. So they were all gone by the time I started having kids.
Yeah.
And I just did not have that support, because also they lived clear across the country from me. So I had to get very resourceful and to have no shame about reaching out. I joined care.com. That's another incredible resource. And I started to interview people who could help me for an affordable rate. And there are plenty of teenagers and college students and people who really need the money, who are really good with kids.
Yeah.
Who charge very, very little, by the way, you know. And you know, you can negotiate with them inside or outside of that service, and just get in your local communities and reach out. Like, don't be ashamed to reach out. I know I had no choice as a single mom but to reach out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of moms are struggling with that feeling of being overwhelmed, being like there's just too much they're trying to juggle, and they don't have the support network around them.
I've been through that, and I essentially just gave up. I'm like, well, I'm only going to work for 2 hours today because my babysitter called out, and you know, my mom lives across the country, and I've gone through those days, right? But then I decided to push through them anyway. Sometimes that push through looks very different. But what if you are the pioneer to that, where I just basically said, yes, clients, you're going to hear a baby in the background. You're going to hear some whinings and some occasional cries, and you know, sometimes I'm going to have to put you on hold and come back to you in 5 minutes. And those are things that are a part of supporting mothers. Yeah. And if we are the pioneers of that, then we can shamelessly portray that to the world, you know.
That's a really powerful message for moms to hear, for parents to hear, that they can include their children in this process. It doesn't have to be a separation, right?
It wasn't a separation. I had no choice but to include my children in the building of an incredibly successful business, and one that I enjoy daily still.
And that is something.
Home right now. She's sick today, so she's home.
Yeah. And so in that case, she's obviously older. She can watch herself a little bit, right? So you don't have to bring somebody in. But when that happens for you, do you find that, you tend to, how do I want to say this? That in those moments of working on creating your life's work, what you're doing in the world, and teaching your kids also how to be conscious and, you know, unique in how they express who they are in the world, what is it that works for you? Like, how do you make sure your kids uh, feel empowered with showing up and being conscious in how they choose to live their life?
That looks very different for each child.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, I have two kids that are, in spiritual communities, they call them the indigo kids, right? And Dolores Cannon, one of my favorite teachers, called them third wavers. There's different things that we're calling these different collectives of children that are just not a little different. I mean, significantly different than the way that society is telling them they, quote, should be.
Right.
Quote, right? So these conditions in society and all societies are rupturing, and they're just being blown apart by our children. Those of us who are, of the childbearing age and have children, from babies to teenagers, we are the ones bringing in these children. So I used to experience a lot of shame about that, because I'm like, oh, my child's the loud child. My child's the one that is saying something allegedly inappropriate, and like, what even is inappropriate? But my children, especially my teenagers, they go above and beyond catalyzing people to be uncomfortable in their jargon and semantics and languaging.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They'll say something like incredibly uncomfortable, and they're like, and they won't do it, outside of the house, but they'll say something to break my own barriers.
Okay.
Like if I'm afraid of someone being a racist, they'll say the N word right to me and say, "How's that make you feel?" And look me right in the eyes. And I'm like, well, how do you mean it? I don't know. I was just trying to get a reaction from you. So you're going to get kids doing things like that. And are you ashamed of it? Are you holding them back because of society's discomfort to break that barrier of racism? Like there's things like that happening that people aren't talking about in society, where like I used to think, wow, because that was carried down kind of from the other side of the family. Their dad really had some strong views
Mm-hmm.
about that, and he taught that and instilled that in them. And I had to make that decision whether I wanted to, like, obviously try to break that pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying not to judge them as being like, oh my gosh, are my kids racist? Like, why did they make black jokes? Why did they make, it was this really interesting thing. And they're making black jokes with their black friends, and the black friends are like, dude, you're white, and then they'd all start laughing. And I'm like, why is the black kid not offended? And I'm like observing all this, and I'm observing all these racial barriers. And then my friends are like, especially in spiritual communities, my friends are saying things like, your children are racist and you need to fix it, mom. And I'm like, or, you're uncomfortable with the fact that my child's trying to break down your paradigm. And if it's hurting your feelings, yes, my child should be observant of your feelings. And it's happening for a reason, for these racial paradigms to be broken down as well, without giving permission to being an outright bigot. That's something I do not allow, right? My kids don't do that anyway, but if they did, I wouldn't allow it.
So that's an interesting point you bring up about being like triggered, right? And how they're there in a sense to bring up what your triggers are. So how do you suggest people handle that when, you're in the moment? You obviously want to be respectful and loving to your kids, but then you have this trigger of you get super angry or frustrated. And
I tell them that. I'm honest. I'm like, I feel that when you use the N word in my presence, I'm just giving that as an example because that was the most recent thing when my kids tried to break down my racism fears. They were like, well, no, and said something about an N word, and I went, what? Excuse me? I get shocked, right?
Yeah.
Shock value. My kids acting like racist, quote unquote. And I'm like, wow, I just completely judged them. So I become aware of my judgmental response. Okay. Because what it is, it's not negative or positive. It is a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So I become aware of a powerful reaction that I'm having within myself. And I talk to them about that powerful reaction by saying, when you said this, I felt this way inside of myself. And then I reacted strongly.
Mm-hmm.
That behavior is hurting me. It's not you. It's not your attempt to hurt me. I love you. And what you just said is a behavior that's causing a reaction in me. So let's talk about it. So we talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that usually you find goes well with your kids. You have a, you see
Sometimes my kids are such powerful catalysts that sometimes they'll just keep going with the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that some of you listening right now will really relate to this when you have these indigo kids, these third wavers who are coming in to trigger you.
Yeah.
So my kids will be like, next they'll go for the gay jokes, you know.
Yeah.
Next.
Yeah. It's amazing how they know just how to work for the angle. Like they don't even consciously know. It's like they just know what works for you. Like when I get upset or when I feel frustrated, my daughter just laughs at me. She's 3 and she just laughs and thinks it's hysterical when I'm in a mood. And so it's yeah, it's funny how it just kind of it's like I can't even be upset around her because she just doesn't even like.
So whatever your triggers are, I was very triggered that their father acted in that way and had a lot of racist beliefs and a lot of gay people. So my kids reflect that back to me so that I can face that within themselves. And the more I just started laughing at it too, and I went, well, it's really silly that people use the N-word, isn't it? It's really silly that people even think words are bad to begin with, isn't it? It's really silly that we think there's a separation between someone who's white and someone who's black. We're humans. Isn't this all silly? And then we all just kind of start laughing at the silliness that we create in this idea that because your skin is different, that I get to call you a word, or you get to be offended that I do it, or you get to call me a word and I get to be offended that you do it. So then the whole concept of that, and then we get to blame it on the past, which is silly because the past isn't here anymore. And we want to honor what we experience, which isn't silly. Okay, we honor what we experience, but if we keep electing to allow that experience to hurt who we are now, there's some power in that and some disempowerment in that. So where do we stand in that balance?
Yeah, I love how well you articulate that. It's really powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, Pamela, if there are any favorite or valuable resources that you just couldn't live without being a mom running her own business. Like, how do you find that you kind of keep your family together? It works for you. Just some real practical.
Care.com. Don't be afraid to interview a stranger, get to know a stranger, and give them a chance. Obviously do background checks, do smart things. Do background checks. Care.com offers that. Like, I am not ashamed when I say I need some help and I need a babysitter, and I will keep going. I have to go through hundreds of people to find the right one.
Wow.
I ask for help with my community. I ask for help from my neighbors. I ask for help, and I am not ashamed to receive it.
So important for people to hear that.
Meetup.com for just finding parental groups. La Leche League. I love them for new moms. Various resources that are out there in this way are just so incredible. And you'll go to one website and you'll see them list another resource, wish list another resource, and just get all the resources that you can like that. They were just so valuable. Yeah, and let's talk about the greatest resource, your heart. Yeah. Before I even knew about any of these resources, I got a great ability to learn to flow with uncertainty by trusting my instinct, my mommy instinct. It's always right. So if there was something that, even if it didn't make sense, that I did or didn't trust a caretaker, or I did or didn't trust a scenario or a school or a teacher or this or that, I had to learn to trust myself. And then another thing that I often said to myself while in the space of learning to trust myself, 4 kids later, took some time. It wasn't immediate. I began to say, this too shall pass, because everything does. And I began to learn that change is the only constant on earth. Change and love. Those are the 2 things that are real.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. That's beautiful. And I think we all need to be reminded of that we can have all the chaos going on in our life. And if we can just realize it will pass, it's not always, it's a season, right? I think that's for me, the biggest reminder is when it feels chaotic and hectic is to just come to, this is a season. I'm in it right now. And it passes. And something that my mom used to say to me, and she's such an incredible mom. I was just one of those really lucky people who had that resource, right? And still do.
My mom's incredible. And one of the things she said to me when I was like trying to raise my kids and I'd get scared, I'm like, oh my God, she's in second grade and she's still doesn't tie her shoes. You know, I raised an autistic child who's 15 now, and it was like, oh my gosh, they're 15 and he's still doing this or doing that. And my mom would always say, well, when they go down the graduation aisle, they're not still going to be doing that. She will know how to tie her shoes when she walks down the aisle. And I'm like, well, what if she doesn't? And mom would say, okay, what if she doesn't? You'll get resources. You will get shoestrings that don't tie. You will get Velcro shoes. You'll be okay. What if she doesn't? Face that too. Yeah. But chances are it's going to be okay, and that they're going to grow out of the stages that they're in that's scaring you currently. And if they don't, face that too. And know that there's so many valuable resources that'll work you through that as well. And Sarah, you're an amazing living example of that for all of us with your child.
Yeah, it's been a work in progress to learn and be taught by how our kids' unique needs need to be addressed from a very unique perspective, right? It's like, because I see that all the time with how compared, like, okay, this is what she needs to be like to be in preschool. I'm like thinking, well, I think she's going to go to a regular preschool. So we don't need that to be a goal. Like the goal, you know, to sit for.
And you get to make that discernment as a mom.
Right. And that's where I think a lot of moms feel like they have to go with what people are telling them on the outside, and to just, like you said, come back to your own intuition, what feels right, what doesn't. And
yeah, I remember going through that with little Emmy when she was in a Montessori school and she still couldn't, well, not really that she couldn't read very well, because she would read for me, then she'd go to school and be uncomfortable with one particular teacher, and then she wouldn't read for her. Mm-hmm. And the teacher was like, I don't know what to tell you. I have a feeling that she can read because I see her like reading things when I'm not looking, but she won't read for me. Yeah. So unless she learns to do this, we're suggesting that you hold her back a year and not put her in first grade at this charter school that you want her to be in, because they're going to put her in special needs and they're going to slap a label and they're going to do this and they're going to do that. And I had a moment of choice. Mm-hmm. To leave her or go ahead and put my child in first grade at this school. And I'm like, you know what? I just have to trust myself. I'm going to go ahead and take her out of the Montessori and put her in first grade at this school. That's just what my instinct is telling me. And you know what? She was reading for those teachers. And not only was she reading, she was 2 grades ahead. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea. Like, I really was like, I think she's fine. She reads for me. We're reading books together fine. And I'm just going to have to trust my instinct. And it was like, imagine if I had listened to that teacher's advice. You see what I'm saying? Just because she's a teacher and I'm allegedly not. Really? You are the teacher because you're the mom.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important. That's super important. Now, are there any final thoughts or messages that you have for people who are raising their kids, raising consciousness in the work they do, and just wanting to live their passion in life? Like, what would be that message or thoughts that you have for them?
Expect the unexpected. Remember, nothing's true in this environment except love and change.
Yeah.
Question that. When you have something that's fear-based, it's likely not true, or it just kind of edges around the truth a bit, just to bring you back to your truth between you and your children. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And when you say it's love, like how does someone know that? How do they discern, like, okay, this is love versus?
Well, for instance, going back to the example of the Montessori teacher who said my child should not go to this fancy school or whatever because she wouldn't be ready, and they'd label her and all these things. And I'm like, that feels like fear. How do I feel about this? Check in, do a double check right here, breathe through it. What do I feel? I feel fear. Oh my God, what if it's true? Oh my gosh, you're going to get a special needs label. Then I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
and I just
that contracted feeling around it.
I sat with it and I'm like, well, what's going to happen if she gets a special needs level in an incredibly powerful school that's a charter school for liberal arts and very unusual kids to begin with? Well, she gets the label, they're going to work with her because they're incredible and I trust them. Yeah. I pick the school because I trust them. Mm-hmm. And no special needs labels, nothing like that,
Awesome.
But trust yourself. Go back to center. What are you feeling? Is it love? Is it fear? There's many variations of loving feelings. There's many variations of fear-based feelings. So under that umbrella of fear, you have shame, guilt, agitation, anxiety, confusion, by the way, a cover for fear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Under the love umbrella, you have joy, hope, faith, trust, allowance,
Right.
excitement, joy, like, oh my gosh, grace is a pretty indescribable feeling. It's kind of has its own umbrella over love, even.
Mm-hmm.
So there's various things that you could be feeling in that arena as well. And if you feel that, trust that.
Yes.
What is the most loving choice for you and your child? Not just for your child, but you're in that too.
Yeah. That's that's so powerful for people to really take that in. And Pamela, you are such an incredible teacher of grace and of love. And I, what would you want people to check out your work? Is there a place you'd like them to go? Is there anywhere that people can find out more about you?
Yeah, you can go to PamelaAaralyn.com if you just want to learn more about what I do. It's just following my journey on a daily basis. You can find that over on YouTube just by searching Pamela Aaralyn,
Yeah.
and hear about my journey with parenting and my journey with going blind, which is a recent journey within the past few weeks, and how I kind of like, so interesting, like people trying to label alleged disabilities when I don't feel disabled at all, and that journey. And it's just been an incredible journey with parenting with that as well.
Right. Yeah. And Pamela, your YouTube channel is an incredible resource for people. I find that it's my favorite go-to. So yeah, if you have not checked out Pamela's YouTube channel, you have to go look at her videos. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and your presence, and very honored to share the space with you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
All right.